Coming up, yeah, I know the Yankees lost the World Series, but tonight I'm going to talk about the NBA. Let's get into it. So we are reaching mid-November. It's still very early in the NBA season. Dan Aquino is not with me today. He's usually my NBA guy, but it's just going to be me solo tonight, talking about some of the standouts that I've seen so far this season, this young season. Bunch of teams that I have listed here. We have three negative, three positive, and of course, we're going to start with the negative because that's what sells here, right? Negativity, talking about issues. That's what's more interesting. Unfortunately, in today's society, we're going to talk about the New York Knicks to start. Yes, New York Knicks are in the negative category here. Uh, I have been on the record about this team. I'm a Brooklyn Nets fan, as you know, so I try to be as fair as I can, but sometimes I may come off a little, a little mean spirited towards them. And it's, all good and fun, but that's only because their fan base is so mean spirited towards my team. And the New York Knicks this season, I can't say I haven't enjoyed what I've watched so far after so far a underwhelming start. And I have a lot of things to say because I feel like Knick fans, there's a majority of them that are still kind of like, it's early, give this team time. The East, they're still one of the better teams in the East. And while I would agree with that, there are still several concerns here that I think, also Knick fans are not used to being in the championship contending category. Now that you are considered to be a team that is competing for a championship, this whole we're one of the best teams in the East, still one of the better teams in the East things, that's not the standard you're living up to now. Now it's about, hey, is this team going to contend for a championship? And what I've seen so far this year, the answer is clearly no, so far as currently constructed. And we're going to get to a lot of things with this team, but I have to start with Mikal Bridges, who, listen, I take a lot of enjoyment in this. I'm going to admit this Mikal Bridges trade. I know it's early, but I'm going to give you my reasons why I believe this. It is on alert for being one of the worst trades in NBA history, maybe in sports history. And if you think I'm overreacting, if you think I'm just being animated, um, and listen, am I being premature? I will not deny that I'm possibly being premature here, because it is early on in the season. But I've watched Mikal Bridges on the Knicks this year. Nothing has changed since last season. Nothing. And I asked this question to Knicks fans. Simple question that a lot of them can't seem to really answer. What is Mikal Bridges elite at? Is he elite defender anymore? Nope. Is he an elite shot creator? Nope. Is he an elite shooter? Nope. Is he an elite leader? No. I'll give you one thing he might be elite at: being a teammate. You can clap on the bench for your team. That's about it when it comes to the elite things that Mikal Bridges does. He's solid to mediocre at pretty much every aspect of the game. And that's fine for a role player, right? Not every player has to do something extremely, extremely well. They're a well-balanced player. You're not a bad basketball player. No one's saying Mikal Bridges is a bad basketball player. But he's not worth the package the Knicks gave up for him. And the only reason why you're not seeing Knicks fans completely flip on this guy right away is because he came over in a trade with the Nets. And they're scared to admit that they might have fucked up on this trade. I mean, it is so abundantly clear if you watched Mikal Bridges all of last season, he, as the number one option, averaged 19 points per game. Okay, the number one option. Now, really, it was Cam Thomas, I think, that was doing the more aggressive scorer. Anyone who watched the Nets kind of knows that. But Mikal had his opportunity. I mean, there was a time where Cam Thomas wasn't in the starting lineup for reasons only Jacques Vaughn knows, and it completely tanked the season for the Nets last year. But it's funny to watch Knicks fans when the trade happened, and even early on in this season, basically blamed all of Mikal Bridges' struggles on the Nets being a bad team last year. I'm sorry. Any team, I don't care if you're good or bad, if you're a bad team and you have really good, if you're really good at something, like look at Jeremy Grant on the Pistons a couple years ago. You can put up numbers. And Mikal Bridges couldn't do that. Mikal Bridges got hot for 2 months, and it has completely changed the narrative on him. And now, when you see he's not really that, Knicks fans start to say, oh, this guy really isn't who we thought he was. For 2 months, when Mikal Bridges was in the playoffs, led the Nets to the playoffs after that, he was on fire for 2 months. He looked awesome. Guess what? NBA players get hot every once in a while. And Mikal Bridges, who is somebody that plays 82 games a year, you kept hearing that over and over again. 82 games, 82 games. Yeah, he's great in 41. He's absolutely terrible in the other 41. I know this because I watched him all of last year. If there's anybody who knows Mikal Bridges at this moment, it is Brooklyn Net fans, because we saw that he doesn't really play defense anymore. We saw that he's not great offensively either. He can't be a guy who creates by himself really that much or all that well when you need him to. He's a guy who disappears. I mean, there's several Knick games you're seeing it where he just disappears. You can't even tell he's on the floor. And I ask this because we're going to talk about this. I want to question Leon Rose a little bit here, because Leon Rose, if you asked New York sports fans who the best general manager in the entire city is, and this is all sports, they would have told you Leon Rose, which I thought was ridiculous. Ridiculously premature. This guy just happens to be the GM that kind of pulled the Knicks out of the gutter, and he deserves credit for that. I'm not going to say he doesn't. But this idea that he's some wizard, trust in Leon, is ridiculous to me. Absolutely insane. Because he didn't bring in Julius Randle. Now, did he put a pieces around to make Julius Randle succeed? Did he hire a good coach? Yeah, he deserves some credit. I'm not saying he's incompetent. But I tell you, you're not a really good GM, to me, if you do some of the moves that he's done. And I'm going to list some of them. He drafted Obi Toppin in a time where the Knicks really needed a point guard. They really needed a point guard, and Tyrese Halliburton was right there. But no one remembers that because Jalen Brunson seemed to be a good Band-Aid for that. Let's talk about Jalen Brunson. Do you seriously think Leon Rose knew Jalen Brunson would be this good? Do you seriously think that? Because I think you're lying to yourself if you do. Jalen Brunson has turned out to be an excellent point guard, excellent player, top 15 player in the league, I think you could say. There's no way Leon Rose saw that coming. No way. Did he get a good point guard? Yeah. I'm not going to say it's a bad move by any means, but you cannot tell me he saw this coming from Jalen Brunson. You can't tell me convincingly. You can't. So let's talk about this thing too. Evan Fournier, Kemba Walker contracts. Anybody remember that? How atrocious were those deals? Didn't help the team at all. Has he drafted some good role players? Absolutely. Emmanuel Quickly, Quentin Grimes helped them get Bogdanovich, who was a good player for them, I thought. Good depth piece. It's a good trade. They didn't have to give up any picks. And he was saving these picks for what I thought was going to be an elite superstar. And if he did that, then I would have to turn my opinions of him away. I'm sorry. You're not an elite GM in my mind when you're basically the only man, I believe, who has thrown this amount of draft capital at a role player that everybody who paid attention last year knew didn't have a good year in Mikal Bridges. That pick package that Leon Rose gave up for Bridges was good enough to get anybody in the league. If you just attached maybe a little bit more player talent, that pick package, good enough to get anybody in the league. And I'm sorry, and you're seeing a lot of Knicks fans defend Leon because, they want to defend him, saying, well, we didn't know Giannis was going to be available. Giannis is not on the trade block. The Bucks aren't trading Giannis this year. What's the rush? You waited for years. What's the rush of making these massive changes to a team that played extremely well in the second half of last season after the OG and Anunoby trade, who didn't really play together all that much between Randall, OG, and Brunson, and when they did, were excellent. And you had DiVincenzo, you had a little bit more depth. You had Bogdanovich in there, can come in and create for you, right? All of that. You had Hartenstein, obviously, who would have been tough to bring back no matter what. I mean, that team had depth and a really good thing going. And yet, for some reason, I said it at the time, to give all those picks up for a guy who makes you marginally better at best in Mikal Bridges. And you're seeing it right now. They look worse. It's still early, but Mikal Bridges is not transferring all his role player energy to the defensive end, clearly. And he's not doing enough offensively, and he disappears. 6 first-round picks. And before I was saying 5 because it was 5 unprotected. They got a protected pick. That protected pick is a Bucks protected pick. Top 4. That's a first. So I look at it like this, plus there's a pick swap. The New York Knicks went from a team that had a lot of good things going chemistry-wise, had a lot of really good talent on the team, good coach, and they decided, excuse me, they decided to trade all of their flexibility for a role player. And the only reason you're not, like, the fan base isn't going crazy about this is because he went to Villanova. He's a good guy. Everybody likes Mikal Bridges as a person. Nobody wants to rip Mikal Bridges because he's a good guy. He's a fun to root for guy, I will admit, when he's playing well. But he's not playing well, and he's not that guy. So any Knick fan who thinks it's early, it's going to get better, here's my retort to that. Mikal Bridges, right now, let me pull it up here. His stats, he's averaging 15 points per game. He's shooting 48% from the field, and he's shooting 30% from 3. Now, I agree the 3-point shooting will go up. I mean, listen, a big thing with him, too, is obviously the look of his shot. He hasn't shot well from 3 of recently. That's probably why it's so low right now. So I expect it to be around 36, 37, 38%, which is what he is for his career. He's 63% from the free throw line, which I think is concerning, and his effective field goal percentage is 55%. Over his career, his field goal percentage, points, and effective field goal percentage are all relatively the same for his entire career. And his defense is mediocre, which it wasn't in Phoenix. So you traded your entire future for a guy who is elite at nothing. And you're surprised at the result. And anybody who saw Mikal Bridges play last year knew he was not worth that. But the Knicks, Leon Rose, really bought into this Villanova chemistry thing, even though he bailed on it when trading Dante DiVincenzo away. Now you have no flexibility. And listen, if you're going to trade all those picks for somebody, it has to be for a real difference maker, say a Giannis. And everybody in their grandma knew you didn't have to be in the front office. You didn't have to know these agents to know that, hey, Giannis is probably not going to be on the Bucks for very long. We knew this last year. Even with the contract extension. We knew. Anybody with a brain knew. And even if Giannis didn't go to the Knicks, for example, because I know Knicks fans will say, well, we've waited for superstars our whole life. Blah, 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 blah. We never get them. It's a little different now. Like your team is actually really, really good and has the pieces to make a move, is enticing enough. And you had a glorious opportunity to actually get one of those guys, and you threw it away at Mikal Bridges. Here's the thing. The New York Knicks are going to be a good team. I do expect the Knicks to be top, one of the better teams in the East. I think they'll get it together. Mainly when Mitchell Robinson comes back and starts protecting Karl Anthony Towns' terrible defense. But hey, Cat's putting up good offensive numbers, so no Knick fan really is criticizing him. Also, Mikal Bridges really has been that, unappealing, especially with that trade package. Jalen Brunson hasn't been as great. I expect that to change. Here's the thing: they will get better, but it will not be because of Mikal Bridges' production changing. He's not going to get better. The team may get it better. They may add a. And here's another thing: they don't really have a lot of outs. They can't really get out of one of these guys because who wants them? Who wants Mikal Bridges now? Seriously. You're going to try and trade Mikal Bridges? You're not going to do that because you gave up that whole pick package. You're not going to do that, right? OG Anunoby, who wants him at that contract? Who wants Cat's contract? I know Cat's been good. Who wants him? Seriously. I mean, there's a reason why Minnesota can only get Julius Randle, who the Knicks were trying to trade. Nobody was interested. Really? So now, where's your out? Where's your out to get this team better? How are you going to make this team better? You need more depth pieces. I'm sure they'll try to scrounge any possibility that they have, but their depth is atrocious. Jericho Sims, Matt Ryan, who was a former quarterback for the Falcons, Cameron Payne, Deuce McBride, Tyler Kolek doesn't play because there's too many guards between Payne and Deuce. Too small. This team right now is small. And you think you're going to beat the Boston Celtics? What? Just because you have two wing defenders? I say that with quotes because Mikal Bridges really isn't good defensively anymore. And anybody who watched him last year knew that, except Leon Rose and Knick fans who just assumed Mikal Bridges was the just casually that defender he was in Phoenix. We don't need him to be this. We don't need him to be that. Yeah, you do, actually. You do need more out of Mikal Bridges because guess what? You traded your whole future for the guy. So I don't want to hear, we don't need him to do this. We don't need him to do that. We just need him to do what he does best. And what is that exactly? So I got a bone to pick with Knick fans because you're seeing it. Denial immediately. Rudy Gobert, you're hearing that comparison, which is hilarious to me. It's not even close. Rudy Gobert was a former All-Star, four-time Defensive Player of the Year award winner now. Okay? He was injured that season. His starting point guard for the majority of the year was D'Angelo Russell. Karl Anthony Towns played like 26 games, and the Timberwolves still made the playoffs and gave Denver a pretty decent fight in the first round. Not even close. Mikal Bridges didn't show that. He didn't show that. Mikal Bridges is giving you nothing this year that was different than last year. So, miss me with that. That's ridiculous. This is what they gave up in this Mikal Bridges trade. First of all, they got Mikal Bridges, Keita Bates-Diop, a 2026 second round pick, and draft rights to somebody. Nets got unprotected firsts in 2025, 27, 29, 31, an unprotected pick swap in 2028, a top 4 protected Bucks pick in 2025, a second round pick in 2025, which will be good because this draft is supposed to be very good, of good player in Bogdanovic who could be worth a pick or to a pick of some kind. This guy Diakite, I guess, the dude who played at Virginia, who Marks flipped for Zaire Williams, who's been an exceptional role player and a way better defender than Mikal Bridges was at any point for the Brooklyn Nets, and Shake Milton. This trade, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing the both sides win it. Sure, if the Knicks win a title, fine. How are the Knicks winning a title when they have no depth, are insanely small, and a shooting guard who disappears and particularly doesn't really play anything great? He doesn't really do anything great. And Cat, who's been great offensively, sure. And Knicks fans, they've been watching so much bad basketball their entire lives that they look at Cat as the savior. But no one's shocked at what Cat's doing. Everyone knew Cat could score. Everyone knew Cat was efficient. Everyone knew he could shoot. Can he defend? When was the last time you saw him starting at center? How did that team do in Minnesota? They were a 7 seed with Cat there. So listen, Uh, that's what I got to say about them. And if you could say I'm giving up on them, you could say I'm being too harsh. I don't really understand that. I don't really understand that thinking. How am I being harsh? How am I being harsh on Leon Rose? Who gives up that amount of draft capital for a role player? How uneducated are you to know that, oh, yeah, Mikal Bridges, he's worth that much? I mean, he's worth four. If people are talking about four firsts, fine. The Nets were declining all this. I don't understand what other teams were seeing in the guy. And I'm sure they backed off once they saw him last year. But the Knicks, they just had to get Mikal Bridges for some reason. And I really don't understand it. Let's talk about Philly. The 76ers' entire organization are a bunch of frauds. Completely. Just a complete bunch of frauds. And that's unfortunate because I actually kind of understood what they did and liked what they did. But the reality of the situation is this team is zero threat in the East, in my opinion, with the personalities that they have. Any team that doesn't take the regular season seriously is a problem. Is and not in a good way. They're a problem. They're a problem for basketball, and they always typically end up being disappointing unless LeBron James is on your team. You got to take the regular season seriously. And you're seeing Golden State, who the past couple years didn't really do that. They're coming out firing. We'll get to them later. But the 76ers entire organization, Daryl Morey, I mean, what has he won? Seriously. Tyrese Maxey is really the only guy I respect, but that fan base and NBA media has dramatically overrated Maxey, in my opinion. And I've been somewhat consistent of that, even though I was very impressed with him in the playoffs. I still think if the 76ers are going to be a different team, he would be the guy that kind of leads that. But take Embiid and them off the floor. He's not, what does he do? He's seriously. You talk about Tyrese Max, people talk about Tyrese Maxey like he's way better than, say, Cam Thomas. And if you watch, there's really no difference. In fact, you can argue Cam Thomas is better, if not just as good. You can make that argument. Seriously. If you just watch them play, I don't really see the difference. And I like Maxey. Paul George, to me, has been one of the most overrated players in NBA history. I mean, how many young players talk about Paul George? Oh, he's so good. I get it because he's skilled and he does some things where like, oh my God, Paul George. And his defense historically has been that he's been very effective as a defensive player. He's had a couple really good seasons. He had that one year with the Clippers where he won in the postseason without Kawhi Leonard, taking them to the conference finals, their first in franchise history. I'm not saying Paul George is but listen, I'm not relying on Paul George to change the culture of the 76er team, which leads me to Joel Embiid because it all comes down to him. I don't think it really matters. You can have a good coach with Embiid. You can have a good supporting cast. I genuinely think Joel Embiid just doesn't get it. He loses in the second round every year. You watch him flop every single time down the floor. I mean, don't you think it's concerning that you get your ass kicked by the Knicks in a play-in tournament game? Sorry, not play-in tournament, in-season tournament game. You get your ass whooped by them. And you're playing the Cavs the next night, who's undefeated. And don't you think as a competitor, as a team that plans to contend, wouldn't your, I don't know, your competitive fire, wouldn't that be enough to get you to play that game? No, they all sat. And now they're 2-9. They're a disgrace. They're a disgraceful organization, in my opinion, what they've done so far this year. And they have a lot of guys I respect. Nick Nurse, I respect. Maxey, I respect. You got to respect Joel Embiid a little bit. Paul George, all that stuff. But Joel Embiid lost me after last year in the playoffs. He did. I'm like, this guy's going to be hurt in the playoffs every year. He's never going to be in shape. He's going to flop all the time. And that's the case with Joel Embiid. I kind of lost so much confidence in him last year. And now the 76ers are in a very bad position to start this season. Now, the East is not good. They will be fine. They're in regards to the regular season, but I don't care about the regular season. What are you doing to me in the postseason? What is this? Who's on this team that you're like, oh yeah, Philly's gonna really challenge Boston? I really trust the playoff resumes of Joel Embiid, Paul George. Like what? What's like Jimmy Butler's not on this team. It's Paul George. So I'm out on Philly. I was out on Philly before the season, even more out on them now. They've shown me no reason to think why I should be wrong here. All right, last negative team, the Bucks. Giannis is out of there. I mean, you're seeing it. I think there's something really, truly, deeply wrong with this team, and a lot of people are talking about Doc Rivers. And I'm not going to sit here and defend Doc Rivers. I hate blaming coaches for everything. I'm not going to defend Doc Rivers. I mean, the numbers are there. I mean, the Bucks haven't been a good team with him as the head coach. They just haven't been. But I think it's deeper than Doc Rivers because this team had flaws before Doc, and now it's even worse. I think really you got to look at Dame here. Damian Lillard with his shooting ability and some of these wasted years in Portland, you thought he could be a guy that could. He obviously went to the Western Conference Finals a couple years ago, a little fluky run, but still, he went to the Western Conference Finals. They beat Denver. Like, you know, they got hot at the right time. But here's the thing with Portland, not Portland, with Dame. He has what he needs. He's playing with a guy in Giannis. Why can't this be like a Kobe Shaq thing? I think we got to look at Dame and be like, can you contribute to winning basketball? Or are you just worried about Dame time? Are you that upset you didn't go to Miami? I mean, you're in a pretty when he got there. I mean, he was in a pretty good situation. Now Middleton's always hurt, I get it, but they should be better than this. And Dame does nothing to help it. I mean, defensively they're atrocious. They let every guard in the league score on them. Whose fault is that? What are we just gonna supposed to excuse Damian Lillard's poor defense? Why? Especially when he's basically good once a week. I know he had a little hot stretch there. The Bucks are going to be a playoff team, I believe. But I don't know where. I don't think it's going to be top 5, top 6. I mean, they could, but what have they done recently? They're just old. They suck defensively. They're poorly coached. Doc Rivers is one of the most overrated coaches of all time. That's been said. In fact, he's not even overrated anymore because everyone keeps calling him overrated. Um, Listen, this team, ever since Dame got there, has been a disaster. And what's the common denominator? It's Damian Lillard. So what is that? What does that tell you? You could point at so many things. Oh, Middleton's health. I also think we kind of got to look at Giannis a little bit. I know that's crazy to think because Giannis is this great player. Look at every Giannis Antetokounmpo season that wasn't the year he won the championship, which, by the way, he would not have won if the Brooklyn Nets didn't get injured. Sorry. But I had to bring that up. I'm going to give him the ring. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to put an asterisk or anything because injuries happen and stuff happens. But let's just say if Kyrie doesn't get hurt in that series, even just Kyrie doesn't get hurt in that series. What are we saying about Giannis? What are we looking at in his career? He loses in the second round. He's injured now in the playoffs every year at this point, it seems. He was disappointing in the playoffs. Got Mike Budenholzer fired. Look at what's happened since. I mean, I would honestly be hesitant. I know my team's interested in possibly trading for Giannis. I just criticized the Knicks for not trading, waiting for trading for Giannis, even though I think that's a way better thing to do than Mikal Bridges. But I don't know, man. I just look at it like that. And I'm like, well, other than that one championship year, which congratulations, a lot of things happened that made you get to that point. A lot of things went well for you to get to that point. What about now though? What have you done since? So I have to look at Giannis and I just see that. All right, let's get to some positives. Cleveland. Kenny Atkinson is the early favorite for coach of the year, and the job he's done so far has just been exceptional. And there's a newfound energy to Cleveland. Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland look like they love playing with each other now. Your turn, my turn seems to be gone. Um, I think they can keep this up in the regular season. I think with them, I just want to see them play some more elite teams, like some of the best teams in the league, to make me really see if they're a really true contender. Because I'm still skeptical on the roster construction. I'm just going to be consistent with it. They have two small guards and two bigs that don't really space the floor that much, even though Mobley is shooting a little bit better from three. Kenny Atkinson has a history. I mean, he's a big reason why Brook Lopez has had this second half of the year renaissance. Kenny Atkinson instilled that in him. I love Kenny. Kenny Atkinson's a great coach. It just makes Durant Irving look awful for what happened all those years ago, that they couldn't trust a really good coach in Kenny Atkinson. You knew from then it was probably over. I mean, those guys didn't want to be coached. Kenny Atkinson's very good. And you got LeVert and Jared Allen who have played under Kenny before, and they love him. So this Cleveland team has shocked me, but in a way, like if you told me like, okay, they're going to be much better with Kenny Atkinson, I wouldn't tell you you're wrong here. I just want to see them play more elite teams. But Garland has been great. Garland had a kind of rough season last year. I was more concerned like last year, like they played better when Garland was out and Mobley was out, and it was just Mitchell and Allen. And then when Allen was out and Mitchell was out, like Garland and Mobley played pretty good together. I thought that was a construction issue. Um, but Kenny has maneuvered it very well, and Cleveland is in a good spot. I would like to see them trade for maybe someone like Cam Johnson in Brooklyn, who I think will be available at the trade deadline. And Cam Johnson's giving some teams a good season. Even though I don't love Cam Johnson, I think he needs to hit a three in the fourth quarter. For me, I mean, he did it recently, but it shouldn't be that much of a sticking point that Cam Johnson makes a three in the fourth quarter. The ideal the idea of Cam Johnson starting at three for them, providing floor spacing, size, and honestly, he's played very good defense this year and has done some pretty good things this year. I mean, Cam Johnson's numbers are better than Mikal Bridges, Knicks fans. I just wanted to let you know that. So I think I would like to see Cleveland maybe do something like that, add to that team. Talk about Golden State. The Warriors, they're having a don't count us out yet season. And I'm pretty amazed at what's happening in Golden State. And I think Steph Curry and Draymond just wanted to remind people, hey, we're still on this team. We're still good. Don't count us out. And Clay leaving, I feel like people just kind of be like, oh, the dynasty's over. And I think they're like, no. We're still good basketball players. We can still compete. And they got some young players on that team, or I wouldn't say super young, but like just some new additions to that team, that you take Klay Thompson's sulking attitude last year off and Chris Paul's age, and they look better and they look more energized. And you saw that game versus Dallas, and you saw Steph do what he does, and you just think like, if you're running Golden State, you have to maximize this window that you have this guy. This guy doesn't come around often, right? Especially for a specific franchise. I mean, the Golden State Warriors were not seen as this heritage franchise until Steph Curry got there, and it's pretty unbelievable what has happened. And Draymond, who looked like a mental case last year, I mean, has proven that that connection he has with Curry, or Curry's connection with him, is very important. Draymond's passing ability, the way they get Curry off of screens and stuff, it's very crucial to what they do. And while Steve Kerr, I don't think had a great Olympics, he's still obviously a good coach. So Golden State, I'm curious to see if it continues, but I like what I've seen a lot so far. They got to be careful, especially some days Steph wasn't playing. They managed it pretty well. But the Western Conference is a juggernaut. One injury and things could be really over. So you got to be careful of that. All right, last positive team. I got to talk about my Nets. Now, listen, I still think this team is going to be in the lottery. I still think that's their goal. You're seeing Sean Marks go to Rutgers games, looking at Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper. I'm sure he'll be at a Duke game to see Cooper Flag. That just tells you all you need. However, I said at the beginning of the year that if Jordy Fernandez is a really good coach, which I thought he would be, and so far you're seeing it, the Nets are not going to be one of the worst teams in the league. They're not going to be a bottom three team. They're not going to be with the current talent that's on the roster. I expect them to possibly move Schroeder, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, all those guys, But I'm having a really fun time watching Cam Thomas, and I'm talking about him here because I want people to see that Cam Thomas affects winning basketball in a positive. He affects basketball positively. He's not a shot chucker. He hit the biggest shot of the game versus the Pelicans. I think he took 10 shots and he scored 17 points. And everybody was participating. They all look happy. They all like Cam Thomas. Dennis Schroeder called Cam Thomas a max player last year. So you're seeing some of these experts say, um, Cam Thomas is just a shot chucker. He's this, he's that. You're seeing Cam Thomas affect winning basketball. They're in tight games. They're in basically every game. For the most part. I mean, they got waxed by Boston. Who knows? They may get waxed by the Knicks. It wouldn't shock me if the Nets beat the Knicks this weekend. Wouldn't shock me if the Knicks beat the Nets this weekend because, quite frankly, the Nets aren't as talented. But I'm watching this Nets team and I'm just having so much more fun watching them. This team has a direction. They have flexibility. They have interesting young players that I like, and Noah Clowney, Jalen Wilson, even guys like Claxton's still pretty young. And Simmons, since I don't see him as like a crucial piece to this team anymore, I actually have fun every once in a while watching him just pass the ball and get others involved. He's still cooked though at this point offensively, and I think he got an MRI again. So Ben Simmons seems a lot more cooked. But I like Schroeder a lot. That was another good trade Sean Marks made, getting rid of Spencer Dinwiddie, who was awful last season, and getting Dennis Schroeder, who's like a real asset. And anytime you can get 6 first-round picks basically and get your picks back from Houston with the Phoenix picks, like for Mikal Bridges too, like I'm sorry, I just refuse to believe Sean Marks is an atrocious general manager. I understood why he gave Jacques Vaughn an opportunity. I understood the Nash thing, even though it didn't work out. I just thought the Kyrie KD thing, they just didn't want to be coached. And a lot of that was on the stars. And I think Marks has the opportunity to completely change the narrative on him. And Sean Kilpatrick, who was a guy that Sean Marks gave an opportunity to, saying that crap about him on social media, basically. Sean Kilpatrick's not in the league anymore, and the only team that really gave him a shot was Sean Marks. So I'm not really sure why he's saying that, especially since the Nets, got better right after he left and all that. So here's my thing: Sean Marks, I don't believe if you ask the casual fan what they thought of Sean Marks, and not just casual fans, there are people who I respect who don't like him, and I'm not going to tell them they're wrong, but I believe what I believe. I don't believe Sean Marks is a bad GM. I just don't. I mean, look at the players on this team that he has right now. Look at the trades that he's made, getting this team out of that funky, ridiculous situation, and now they're set up pretty well. They remind me a lot of Oklahoma City once they traded Chris Paul. Like they got a guy on the team, I believe in Cam Thomas, who I think is more than a six man. I think some people still see him as a six man, and I don't see it that way. I think Cam Thomas could legitimately be a really good scorer on a playoff team, like, and not just coming off the bench. And I think people just see that. I don't see why Cam Thomas can't be like Devin Booker or like Donovan Mitchell. I don't understand why he's ruled out completely as that. And I think you're seeing it now a little bit what Cam Thomas is capable of, and that he's unselfish too. Just real quickly, I just want to wrap my thoughts on Jordi Fernandez. Jordi Fernandez is a coach that I think really needed to be good, just for the sake and mental health of Nets fans, because they have not been around good coaching in a while. And I can't say enough about how great this guy has been. And honestly, I can't remember the last time I felt so great about a head coach for any of my sports teams, other than maybe Rick Pitino for St. John's and Brian Dable for the Giants that first year. I really loved, but you know, he has been outstanding. And I've loved everything he said. He supports Cam Thomas more than the past coaches have, who really didn't respect him, it seemed like. And I just love how much fight this team has been playing with, even against good teams. And I think it instills a great, it's used a lot of culture or whatever, but it instills a great program that you can build off of. And that's what Sean Marks did with Kenny Atkinson. Anytime Sean Marks made a coaching hire that was legitimately like, okay, we need a good coach, rather than just extending Jacques Vaughn an opportunity
and hiring somebody like Nash, who was really more catered to Durant and Irving after they didn't want to be coached by Kenny Atkinson. Hiring Jordy Fernandez is another example of just like, hey, he nailed Kenny Atkinson. He nailed Jordy Fernandez. It's why like I was critical of Marks and his coaching hires, but I didn't think he was incompetent at hiring a coach. I really did think a lot of the superstars and their running of the organization and them stepping on the toes of everybody there made everyone think that Joe Tsai was an atrocious owner and Sean Marks was an atrocious general manager. And quite frankly, it wouldn't shock me if Nash went to another place and had success. Wouldn't shock me. Jacques Vaughn was bad. He was more of an interim guy. He was really good as an interim guy, but as an actual head coach, no. When he was in charge of everything, no. For a long period of time. Jordy Fernandez, though, love what he's doing. And I thought he would be a good coach coming in, and he's surpassed even the expectations I had. This Nets team is playing with a lot of fight, and even though I expect them to be in the lottery, a lot of Nets fans are upset that they're not losing on purpose and stuff, and it's going to hurt their chances of getting Cooper Flag. Listen, they got 4 picks in this draft, basically, and with the second round pick, that's going to be probably good because then it's the Knicks' second round pick, so it'll probably be in the uppers. But I mean, we'll see. But this is supposed to be a great draft where stars could even come in the middle of the draft, they're saying. So if the Nets are in the lottery, if they could get another lottery with the Bucks pick, that's amazing too. But they have a lot of these picks for this year, and I trust Marks to draft the right guys. I really do because he has a history of drafting really good players in the 20s. I mean, Jared Allen, focal point of that Cavs defense, was a 20s pick, right? Like Cam Thomas was in the 20s, and you see what Cam Thomas is doing now. And they got a lot of young guys I like. And Jordy Fernandez needed to be good for Sean Marks' future. I think Marks has proven with his drafting, hiring Jordy Fernandez so far, that he's not incompetent as a general manager. And I trust and really like where the Nets are at this point. And that's going to be the positives teams I'm going to talk about. I'd like to do this segment in the future every once in a while where I just talk about 3 good things, 3 bad things in the NBA that I want to talk about. So that's going to do it today for the JB podcast. Don't worry, I'm going to get into the Juan Soto stuff and the New York Yankees World Series loss that happened a couple weeks ago. Still recovering, honestly. And yeah, that's going to be it for today's episode. I'll see you guys next time.